Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello. Welcome to the show, everybody. Obviously, Teachers Talk Radio. This is Leading in the 21st Century with Mark Nichols, your host. Today, we will be sharing with you something fascinating, again linked to the struggles that we may face in the 21st century. Specifically, hold on.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
And there you go. That is our intro done. So today we are diving into the fascinating world of artificial intelligence in education with, I must say, a true trailblazer in the field. None other than Dan Fitzpatrick, a leading figure in the AI revolution. He has been titled the AI Educator, author of the best-selling book, or yet to come out, should I say. But Dan, you will discuss that as time goes on. Now, we will be talking about all things artificial intelligence in schools, where I'll be posing some questions really to kind of play the field here as to what artificial intelligence does look like in education, but really to kind of get our heads around and grasp this transformative technology that is going to be taking place around us. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, though, let's take a moment just to introduce our guest. Dan, I do believe you are in the studio with me now. So, yeah, if you don't mind, introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, and thanks for inviting me on. You've got probably the best slot of the week here, 6 o'clock on a Friday. I don't know what you've done to offend someone, but
the early days.
It's good to be here. My name's Dan. You can probably tell from my accent, I'm based in the northeast of England.
Mm-hmm.
So currently my job is I am strategic lead for digital for a group of colleges in the northeast of England. So that includes Sunderland College, Northumberland College, and Hartlepool Sixth Form. I've got a team of about 25 people, and we're kind of leading the digital strategy and kind of trying to change things up, bring things into the 21st century, really, there. Before that, I've been there about a year and a half. Before that, I was on the senior leadership team of a secondary school in County Durham.
Yeah.
And I was teaching kind of all sorts, really. As you do get into senior leadership, you kind of plug the gaps where they're needed, really. So I was teaching, my main subject is RE, actually, so kind of nothing to do with technology. But so I was trained as an RE teacher. I was teaching business studies, geography, a bit of history, and kind of quite a varied educational career, and then always kind of took an interest in educational technology ever since I did my training, and really kind of saw the benefits of Google for Education first, and kind of saw how it was transforming classrooms and how the workflow of students, teachers, making things more efficient, and then the tools allowing, and this is long before COVID ever hit, so allowing remote work to be done, and efficiency with marking, all of that. And I kind of become a bit of an evangelist, a real passion for it, really. So started off in my own school where I was training, and then kind of started doing some kind of training work for Google and Google partners, and just kind of that became kind of my second life outside the classroom, really.
Can I just go back slightly there, Dan? You know, what was it? When were you bitten by the bug in terms of technology? Like within your career, was there a particular moment that you could like actually pin it to, or is it, like you say, is it just kind of crept through your professional life?
I was training. I think so. I trained with United Learning. And I remember, I think a few months in, I was on the skit program, I was working at Accrington
Yeah.
Academy in the northwest. I was living
Yeah.
in Manchester at the time, and I remember being in a session where a guy called Tim, who kind of looked after the computing department, meant he was doing a bit of CPD, and he mentioned Google Drive or Google Classroom, and I remember.
I think I've lost you there, Dan.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you back. So you use
I
Google Classroom, yeah?
Yeah, I mentioned Google, so my Google Assistant took over the phone. Sorry. Yeah, so I'll yeah I'll try not to mention Google again. I just did. So I'd never, the whole concept of educational technology was very foreign to me at the time, and I'd been teaching a couple of months. So, but then when I heard that there was more efficient ways of doing things, and I guess it came down to cloud technology at the end of the day, and I thought actually this could have some real benefit for how we work, and I just noticed that as I was being trained as a teacher and I was looking around where I was working, and no fault to the school, amazing school, but there was a lot of inefficiencies, and
Yeah.
I think there was inefficiencies probably in every school, and I just kind of saw how technology could actually improve things and make life easier, and it's kind of been my own private motto really that technology should make our life
And
easier, and if it doesn't, then throw it out the window essentially.
yeah, and then obviously we have the COVID-19 pandemic, and suddenly those inefficiencies within schools come into light, and there's a big drive to use technology and to adopt cloud platforms and to adopt cloud-based learning and online learning. So I would imagine at that point you would coming into your own as a teacher that had some experience there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I suppose everywhere I'd been teaching, I'd always move them over to Google. It was kind of, I couldn't even help it. Like even if I wasn't going for a role, any technology role, even if I was coming into the school just as an RE teacher,
Hmm.
I'd soon think I'd be like, mainly for myself really, because especially when you start a new school and you're used to all the kind of the workflows and the tech that you've been using at your old school, and you come in and they're still using things from 10 years ago, and you just think,
Yeah.
I need for my own sanity. And then so you end up transforming this whole school just so you can have have the tech tools you want, and that's kind of how I worked really, and kind of yeah, I love that. I kind of the type of person who loves being on the edges of things, I think, and I loved kind of like running breakfast clubs to train teachers up on technology, and really kind of grassroots change within education, really, and then kind of getting the year of the leadership team in the head and kind of moving that way, and exactly what you said there, Mark, about
Hmm.
COVID kind of came into its own, and because I'd done a lot of groundwork in the previous years of moving the school over to Google Classroom, we found that literally I remember when we went into it was announced we were going to go into lockdown. I think it was March.
Hmm.
God knows what date it was, what year it was. I don't know about you, but the past few years just seem to have merged into one. But maybe 2021 was it, or 2020?
I think it's like you say, it's a bit of a merger for me as well. Like time, yeah.
Yeah, but I remember anyway. I remember thinking, we've got everything. The only thing that we kind of really needed to do was because we weren't really using Google Meet, which is Google's video
Yeah.
platform. So we literally did a couple of CPD sessions, and I think it was like on the Thursday and the Friday evening of that last week we were in school, where we went, right, here's Google Meet, here's how to put a link to a Google Meet in your classroom, because at that point it wasn't integrated, um, and we were away. We literally started an online live video call timetable on
Well,
Monday. There
well,
was no down day at all, so we were in a fantastic position to do that, and like you say, I came into my own really, and was able to play a massive part in kind of running the online school during lockdown.
Well, I find it absolutely fascinating that, if we were to go back, say, 5 years, even though the technology was there to do, online calls, like video calls, etc., it wasn't adopted within the education sector. Anyway, I can't speak for other sectors, but it wasn't present as it is today. Like, I find myself in video call meetings working within a trust. on a daily basis on some occasions. But anyway, I do want to move this interview forward, Dan. You're here. You're going to discuss with us the concept of artificial intelligence in education. So I do have a few questions drafted for you. I think first and foremost, how do you see AI technology transforming the future of education? And what do you think are some of the most exciting developments that you or we are likely to see in this area?
Yeah, I would start off with a small question mark.
Well, they get more challenging. They really do.
Yeah. So, by the way, if you can hear kids screaming in the background, it's bedtime.
Oh, cool. Sorry to disturb you on your
It's
family
all
time.
right. My fiance is putting them to bed. So yeah. Well, I suppose I think the first thing to say is AI has kind of been in our lives for a while now. Probably looking at kind of some of the big advances that we first saw in AI, especially kind of this new type of AI, was back in like the early, I would say the late noughties, really, in terms of kind of image recognition, face recognition software.
Mm,
It's kind of how where kind of this kind of started, really, and that kind of the learn how AI systems learn, and that really started that era. And over the last 10 to 12 years, we've seen products slowly come to market, but the chances are you probably won't even know about it because, well, most people won't, because what they haven't come onto the market as big and a big explosion, really, like we've seen in the last few months. The products that have been made by people like Google, Microsoft,
mm.
Amazon, Netflix have just been integrated into already existing tools. So, for example, the mobile phone in your hand right now, if I mean, I'm guessing that's where it is. That's where most mobile phones are.
If not,
The
it's
mobile,
close by somewhere, isn't it? Yeah, usually.
I mean, the amount of artificial intelligence in that is just phenomenal. And you probably don't know about it in the camera. You might have a scanner in there. If it does facial recognition to open your phone, if it takes your thumbprint to open your phone, then that's just scratching the surface.
Mm.
I mean, look around your home. Chances are you might have an Alexa, a Google Assistant that runs on that. You use Amazon, which recommends things based on AI. Netflix does so. AI is really part of our lives, but there's been a leap over the last few years,
Mm.
especially with a company called OpenAI. So OpenAI, founded by a few entrepreneurs, including Elon Musk, actually, back in 2016, I think they were, and
Mm.
essentially their mission was to create a language simulator, so an AI could replicate human language. In order to do that, they had to train it, and that's kind of the key part of any AI system. And I had a great privilege of chatting for a few hours a couple of nights ago with Priya Makani, who is the CEO of Century Tech. And she's kind of a whiz with AI. She's an expert. She works with the government. She builds her own AI products like Century Tech,
Okay.
and she was explaining to me that actually true AI doesn't. You can't just create a true AI machine overnight. You have to spend years and years and years training it and tweaking it, and that's what's been happening behind the scenes, really, especially with OpenAI and their chat, or what is their chat
Mm.
GPT, what it's become. And eventually it got to a point where they was apparently, from what I hear, it shocked them, their latest version, which is GPT 3.5, which is the version that's in ChatGPT, and they started offering it as a kind of plug-in for companies back in early 2022, and then in the summer they decided, "Really, let's create our own user interface," which was essentially a chatbot. If you've ever used ChatGPT, you'll
Yeah.
know it feels a bit like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, and they've essentially just stuck that top of their artificial intelligence machine and just kind of went, right, well, let's release this. And by doing that in late November, I think they went to 1 million users within 24 hours and 100 million users within just under 2 months, which is the fastest ever product to go to 100 million users. I think TikTok
Well,
um,
yeah.
was it 7 months before that. So they've put it out there as a bit of an experimental research project, really, to see how this AI is going to interact. it's kind of taken off, and that's how we've kind of got the big news stories, the buzz that we've got now because of the power of this.
Well,
What
when you
happens?
say it's taken off, Dan, like it really has taken off. Like for I first came across the concept of AI probably in 2016, and reading about it in literature, etc., and then studying for my masters, attending courses and talking about the future of education. And this was a huge module. Looking at how AI is going to shape the future of education, and I was going back to the schools that I was working at the time and saying and talking about artificial intelligence. I even during a CPD, I questioned some high-ranking figure within the DFE, so David Carter, I think it was, and I was like, "Well, what do you think about AI?" And this was this year in November. And it's like, "Oh no, that's miles down the road. It's years away. It's not going to have an impact on education. Not in the foreseeable future." And then in the space of a few months, coming to January, suddenly it's on the scene and everybody's discussing it. And I would imagine you may have felt something along those lines as well.
Yeah, and I often kind of when I talk about technology, especially whenever I do a talk or anything, I love opening with a quote by McKinsey and Company. So about 3 years ago, they said that we're going to experience more progression within technology over the next decade than we have in the last 100 years.
No way.
And that's kind of a lovely quote to open a talk up with, because it kind of has a bit of an impact, that quote.
Can I share a quote with you, Dan, if I may?
Of course, yeah,
So
please do.
I'm a big fan of sci-fi. I love sci-fi. You've got William Gibson reportedly quoted to the press, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I think that kind of alludes to the point that you were making, that AI has always been there. It's just not perhaps distributed where it's noticeable. I don't know.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I've heard that before, and I think that is fascinating. And I suppose it does just take a company like OpenAI to democratize it really and get it out
Yeah,
to
yeah.
everybody. And I don't know about you, but the first time I ever used it, I kind of, that quote that I'd been using for so long suddenly became real.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a theoretical thing of, oh, there's going to be progress at some point. I mean, anyone who's anyone tells you
So
that.
could you pen those feelings down? Was it a sense of admiration? Was it a sense of awe? Was it excitement? What did you feel inside when you suddenly realised the power of this new chatbot that was on the scene?
I guess I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think I kind of just thought, like, I mean, this type of technology, you imagine it from when you were a kid and you're watching sci-fi movies,
Yeah.
and and I think when you actually see it, it's almost like a bit of a disbelief, and then you ask it. So I suppose I was kind of in disbelief really. So I ask it another question, and I ask it another question, and then the more you ask it, the more you kind of think, actually, this is real. This is actually happening.
Have you ever asked it if it was sentient?
I haven't, no. Probably too afraid of the answer.
Sorry. I think I'm digressing here.
No, that's good.
It's just
Yeah,
interesting to hear like your experiences, but I see it with educators that I work with today. Initially kind of slightly aloof to the concept of machine learning and AI, and when you show them what it can do in a matter of seconds, and you suddenly see their eyes pick up and think, "This is going to save me so much time." Um, yeah,
yeah, it's true. I kind of I'm in a lucky position for because I train teachers around the world on this pretty much on a daily basis, that I get to see that kind of jaw dropping moment. Um,
every day I would imagine.
yeah, and I think that it becomes you know what it's like when you're used to seeing something yourself every day, you just get a bit blasé about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, well we could let's ask it a question, and I quickly skip over that bit, and actually I have to remind myself, actually, even just asking it a basic question is very impressive.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I guess I, you know what, I think I going back to that moment when I first realized, I think just this idea of possibilities came into my head, where I think this is probably to most people who've used it, where you just suddenly start, like, little light bulbs start going off in your head, and you start thinking, wow, it could be used for this, it could be used
This,
for that, it could
this,
be,
yeah.
start just getting loads of things where you think, wow, and actually a lot of the technology already exists for this to be applied to millions of different scenarios and different things.
So what? So
Over now.
so Dan, what would you say then to those teachers that may perhaps fear this new technology, because there is obviously discourse out there suggesting that AI is going to replace teachers, it's going to replace jobs. Is there a message that you would like to put out there, um, to that concern, a genuine concern of teachers, the replacement of the workforce? Can
Yeah,
AI get that powerful that it could replace a teacher?
I don't think it'll replace teachers. I think what it will do is it'll replace some of the jobs of teachers, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think the kind of jobs that it will replace will be the types of jobs that kind of stop teachers being teachers. If that makes sense.
Hmm.
And I think it'll change the job. I think we'll have to, and I'm not thinking of immediately for this, probably within the next few years, but I think it'll change probably what our focus is, um, and kind of the skills that we have to teach the students in front of us.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides, and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
In terms, yeah, in terms of those changes, I suppose, what how do you think these changes are necessarily going to be positive? Like, do you think it's going to improve the user experience of education? I'm talking about our core stakeholders here, like students. Do you think the adoption of AI in the education sector is going to benefit the students that we serve?
100%, yeah, absolutely. I think probably the main theme, or the main kind of component that of education that it will change is I think it'll make education a lot more personalized, and I think anything that's personalized more to a specific user, like you say,
Hmm.
is a good thing. I know that there's it's become kind of almost like taboo to talk about differentiation and things like these days, because obviously the teacher workload of having to prepare so many materials or scaffold so much is, it can just get crazy, especially if you're teaching 5 lessons a day, something like that.
Yeah.
And and I think we've kind of, in recent months, recent years, we've kind of gone back to going, right, let's just teach everyone in the class the same thing. Um, and I think there's a lot of students missing out. I think there's a lot of students who need to maybe go a bit slower, who need more help. Some students on the opposite end who need to go faster, who need to be progressing a lot faster. I mean, to be honest, age, we group students by age in school. Age is just it. I mean, I was just about to say age is just a number, but that's quite a cliche. But you know what I mean? Like the level of students in front of you, um, to just group them because of age
Hmm.
limits students, and it hinders others. So
Is
that
is that how we group adults? When you go into the workforce, do you kind
yeah,
of are you grouped into like an age category? Therefore, you are there, because I've met trainee teachers that are older than me, and I see your point there.
absolutely. I mean, look at what Mark Zuckerberg was, head of Facebook in his early 20s, like multi-million-dollar company it was then, and people are at different levels, and it's not necessarily that there are bad or better levels. It's just people learn at different levels. People that's how life is, and I think to offer a more personalized experience of education where students can get more personalized support, so they're not having to vie for the attention of a teacher who's got 30 students in front of them, but actually we've got the technology where they're getting support from something like a chatbot or whatever we'll have in the next few years built on top of that.
Hmm.
I think can only be a good thing, really. And I think the only thing that's gonna, I might be being a bit controversial in saying this, but the only thing that would make it negative is if an educational organisation, the school, doesn't keep up and almost hinders the use of these technologies, so that students aren't learning the skills, aren't learning what they need to thrive and have those benefits, and then also have the skills to be successful when they leave that school.
I know. I mean, what you're discussing there is the concept of the future school. That the future school, you've mentioned. In fact, you hit so many nails on the head there. You talk about personalised learning. Now, the future school most certainly would advocate a personal experience to the education that students receive. But also, you talk about the digital literacy, the digital fluency that schools need to adopt, and embracing technology, because the reality is, and I assume that you would agree with me here, Dan, that these students are going to be growing into a world that is rapidly changing, and regardless of whether we hold back this technology, it's always going to be there. And if schools do not adopt or assimilate, or at least have some understanding of this tech, there's a risk that those schools will be left behind, whilst other schools then progress forward.
And to be honest, this is not new, is it? I mean, COVID really kind of highlighted the digital divide within
Mm,
regions, within schools, between schools, and also within schools. And I think it really highlighted that the students who have access to technology and have the skills to use technology, and the divide between students who don't have that is huge. And and I think we're going to get this is going to entrench that divide even more,
yeah.
because those students who do have access and the skills to use artificial intelligence, it's gonna the digital divide is just going to become too wide if we do get schools who bury their head in the sand and say we're not going to use it, and actually focus on the fears rather than the benefits.
Are you familiar with the IB, the International Baccalaureate in
Um,
A levels, Dan?
yeah,
Yeah. So, are you aware that I think it was within this week or the last, where the head of assessing, or head of assessment materials or whatever, has decided that I think it's for one course or one unit of the IB, where students will be allowed to use chatbots like ChatGPT, for example, um, within the assessment itself. So you've already got some leaders within education, within, in this case, the IB, making that conscious decision that this is a tech that students need to know how to cite, or know how to reference, know how to use to benefit their future learning.
yeah.
Uh, Go on,
There's
go on.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and I think it's, to be honest, it's that's what needs to happen. Really, we need to grab this and just and not ignore it. There's been a translated a few days ago a great guide. It's by the Department for Schools and Education of the state of North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany, and they created a document for their schools. It's about a 10-page document, and it essentially goes through the benefits, the limitations, the kind of what they know so far about the technology,
Yeah.
but it also kind of gives suggestions about how to use it in the classroom, how to use it in assessment, how to use it to plan lessons, and it's such a forward document. Just
And
saying,
is
we're aware of it, we're aware of the limitations, but here are a few ways you can start to benefit from it straight away, and that will have to be revised, absolutely, over the coming months and years, probably 10, 20 times, I imagine. But the fact that some places, and I was doing some work with a college today in Wales
yeah.
who were really grabbing this by the horns and going for it. And I think those educational organisations that run with it early and start playing with it early are going to get the benefits early. And I think, go back to your point before, the key stakeholders here, the students, are the ones who benefit ultimately. And we're even in a divide now by the schools, colleges, universities
Who are adopting the tech now? Yeah.
who are going for it, even though it's imperfect. There's data protection worries around it. There's bias worries. There's so many limitations to this and so many cautions, but the ones who are going to succeed with it are the ones start having a go of it now.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned, like, because this is leading into another question I wanted to ask you, which is, what are the ethical considerations that educators should be taken into account? Because this does kind of feel like the wild west of AI, doesn't it? Like, you've got these new platforms that are being used. Should there be ethical considerations? Should there be ethical, policy set up before the usage, or should it just be that any school can adopt it, not adopt it, do what they want with it, etc.?
Yeah, I think so, and I think probably the number one rule here is outsource the doing, not the thinking. So you
Go on.
want to be in charge of what ChatGPT or whatever other AI you're using does. You need to be very specific with the prompts that you give it. That you know what's coming out of it is going to be of quality, and then you need to evaluate it. You need to critically analyze what it's given you, because it's essentially a database that takes information from the internet or from whatever information has been trained on, and that information was created by humans, and humans have bias. Uh, Especially if ChatGPT 3, which we're all kind of having a go with at the minute, was is was fed 300 billion words worth of information from the internet
Phew.
and all sorts of areas. Now, there'll be a lot of bias in there. I mean, you just have to put the news on to see bias. It's everywhere at the moment. We live in a very polarized society in our politics and in other spheres of our lives. So that a lot of the material out there is bias. It's discriminatory as well. And what it does is it takes that. It doesn't just, to be fair to the technology, it doesn't just regurgitate information. It works out. It has the most impressive thing about this technology is its ability to work out the probability of something being kind of the correct response. That's the real impressive thing about this AI. So it does a good job of it, but some biases still get through. Some discriminatory um, ideas or concepts still come through. So the human in the process still has to be so active. And I think,
I,
sorry, go
yeah,
on, Matt.
no, you carry. If you finish your point, because I just want to add on to this at the end, if I may. So if you can continue on for us, Dan.
Yeah, I think. Well, I was just going to say, I think, and it kind of links into that. You might want to get into this eventually, but the whole kind of plagiarism, cheating argument. That if we just use this tech and go, right, produce some content, produce a bit of work, do this for me, and then we take it and start applying it straight away, or we hand it in as a bit of work straight away, or we give it to students as a bit of content straight away. Um, that's not clever. It's not a good use of technology. I mean, to be fair, I could just go into Wikipedia and copy and paste it and give it to my students. I could type
Hmm.
into Google near resource on the Second World War, find the first article or website I find and copy and paste it and not even read it. I mean, that kind of laziness, that kind of over reliance on technology is not just AI, it's to do with technology in general. And I suppose anyone who uses technology in that way is is, is just asking to to be tripped up really. So I think what we need to do is, and I think again this links perfectly back to the point of that it's not going to replace humans, because we still need the expert, the human, the teacher who knows their stuff, who is literate, who is balanced in their views to be able to pick apart the information it's coming with, and we get better. I mean, there's companies working on ways how to remove the bias and anything like that, and that will happen 100%. The way this technology is speeding up and going, it will happen. But there's always
Well,
going to be the room for the human to determine how to use the information.
well, I'm just thinking in terms of our audience, and like the theme of the show is leading in the 21st century. I want this to kind of go out there to leaders within education, and from what I'm picking up there, there's as much of a pressure on educational leaders to train staff to be able to critically analyze the prompts that are provided. I think you've made that plainly clear through your words there. You know, in terms of outsourcing the doing, not the thinking, and training your staff body up to be able to do that and to do it successfully and to do it ethically, to do it so that it doesn't strip away what we do as practitioners. As you said earlier on in the show, do not strip away the teacher from the teacher. The chatbot is there to complement the teacher, to act as an assistant almost. A second voice that could moderate and help guide you through the structures. Now, before we break for the news, I've got one final question for you, if you don't mind, Dan. What do you see as like the long term future of an AI in education, and how can we prepare for that? I know we've kind of alluded to this question, but I'm talking long term, like 2050. Because I'm still I'm still going to be teaching in that time. I can see myself in 2050. I'd like to know what kind of school you think I'm going to be working in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I can give you a short answer for this, but
that's cool. We got 5 minutes.
Are we? Okay, well, I'll go for it. Right. So, is another project I have is I kind of have a company with two other teachers called EduFuturists, and as part of EduFuturists, we kind of research the future of education. As part of that, we do a weekly podcast. So we essentially get someone who is innovating in education from around the world, and we interview them about what the impact is and how successful it is. What we've noticed, and bear with me because I'm not going to talk about AI here, but it will in a second. What we've noticed is that over the last couple of years, probably since COVID, really, the amount of online schools that have popped up and actually are doing really successfly, and they're private as well, so they're not kind of linked to kind of a state.
Yeah.
They're privately backed. The amount is huge. There's so many of them, and so I've spoke to a lot of them. I spoke to and become I was going to say friends. We're probably not friends yet, but we're become. I know a guy called Josh Down who set up a school with Elon Musk, and Elon Musk backed his school. It's called Synthesis, and they kind of run that from California in the States. And their whole kind of reason for existence is they gather students from around the world to problem solve and to communicate with each other and to collaborate. And that's kind of the whole vision of their school, really, because they see that actually in industry, one of the real missing points, one of the real missing skills is the ability to problem solve and to collaborate and communicate to get there. So these are popping up everywhere. So before kind of last year, I already kind of thought, well, you know what? In the next few years, these online schools are going to be knocking at the door of the education systems. They will be. And I spoke to Gerd Leonhard, who's quite a well-known futurist German fella who brought loads of books out about where he sees kind of the future of technology going, and he's adamant that the next Google, the next kind of billion-dollar corporation, is gonna be an education company that provides education. He says, and I think I agree with him. I think that for a long time the education system has avoided disruption. Like David Price, great guy, great author, said that if you took a surgeon from 100 years ago and put them in a modern day surgery in a hospital, they wouldn't have a clue what to do. They would be baffled. It would be very, very different. If you took a teacher from 100 years ago and put them in a classroom right now, they'd probably just be to crack on with it.
I think they would. I think like the sector is kind of. I've always alluded to it being in some schools I've worked stuck in the 19th century.
Yeah.
Desks in rows facing the front, kind of like a prison almost. From what I'm hearing there, it sounds like we'll not need bricks and mortar schools anymore.
Well,
but I think perhaps we would need them because they'd be serving a different purpose almost. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know where you're going with this, and I completely agree because there's still the need for kind of human connection, isn't there? There's still the need for community.
Yeah.
And actually, once you start going down this avenue, you start actually trying to get to the root of what actually is education. Because is it just the transfer of information? Is it the building of skills, or is it the forming of a human being? And if you were going to say that, and I think we probably all would say it's not just knowledge; it's the forming of
Character formation. Yes.
Yeah.
Dan, like it's been absolutely brilliant chatting to you. I mean, a lot of what you've discussed there is going to feed into the next segment of the show, which is the future school. You just alluded there to the globalization of education, which is pretty much a feature in the next part of the show. But I do need to let you go. Thank you ever so much for taking the time of a Friday evening to connect with us. I really do appreciate it. It'd be great to collaborate with yourself again in the future. Just give me a shout anytime you need anything and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah. Yep. Catch you later, Dan. Thank you very much. Okay, so over to the news now. Thank you for staying with us, guys. Let's chuck on the news for you and let's have some fun.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides, and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out. Visit johncatbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The iNews website covers the issue of vaping in schools. Whilst vaping is thought to have helped many adults kick their unhealthy smoking habits, the rise in straight-to vaping in young people and children rings alarm bells for many. The report focuses on concerns expressed by teachers about angsty pupils struggling with the wait for their next fix. Vapers making school toilets frightening places as they gather in groups, increases in internal truancy, and worries it may lead to pupils experimenting with stronger substances. Some schools have made significant changes to toilets to include sophisticated sensors which set off an alarm when e-cigarettes are used, whilst others have increased numbers of staff on duty in corridors to deter pupils from skipping lessons in order to vape. Many schools have also invited police and health specialists in to talk about vaping in a bid to educate pupils on the dangers. Many schools across the UK now ban vapes, treating them like other banned items such as drugs and knives. This is prompting suspensions and other high-level sanctions in a bid to remove them from schools. England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Sir Chris Whitty, said last week that the number of children vaping was appalling and heavily criticised companies which produce them in flavours such as green gummy bear and watermelon bubblegum. The bright colours, shapes reminiscent of highlighter pens, and the low cost of around £5 making them attractive to youngsters with pocket money to spare, which Whitty described as utterly unacceptable. The proportion of 11 to 17-year-olds who say they have tried vaping rose from 14% to 16% in 2022, according to a YouGov survey, with a percentage of children who regularly vape doubling in the same time period. The article also features references to Teachers Talk Radio's Tom Rogers tweet asking how much of a problem vaping was for schools, with many replies indicating it is a serious cause for concern. Full details of the article are available online. In related news, many media outlets have been reporting on so-called school protests, which seem to be focused on toilets and the right to use them as a key issue. According to multiple stories, pupils have been encouraged to protest about rules focused on restricting free access to toilets by posts on social media platforms such as TikTok. The majority of the schools affected make it clear that rules around access to toilets are made for safeguarding purposes, designed to protect all pupils and to minimise bullying, vaping and other antisocial behaviours. The Evening Standard reports that a quarter of UK student gamblers may be experiencing harm, whilst half said betting had affected their university experience. The survey of over 2,000 students at UK universities was conducted in December. It found that 71% of the respondents had gambled in the last 12 months, with 24% exhibiting problem gambling behaviour. Of the students who said gambling had had an impact on their experiences at university, 13% said they'd had trouble paying for food, 10% had missed lectures, and 9% struggled to pay bills. A third of student gamblers said they spent between £11 to £20 per week, with 13% admitting to a spend of between £50 and £100 per week. Only 55% of those surveyed were aware that support for them was available through their universities. Full details of the report are due at the end of February. Finally, Aberdeen Live reports on a project led by the University of Aberdeen, which has led to a successful trial of a new approach to teaching which is helping improve adult literacy in Rwanda. The project adapted the existing adult educational curriculum to better develop relevant knowledge and skills which can be applied in students' daily lives. These techniques included role play, group activities, case studies, and problem solving. Previously, only 14% of those pursuing an adult learning course felt they had gained the skills they needed, with 66% still unable to read and 76% unable to write by the end of the course. The new method showed improvements in multiple areas, with adults retaining their knowledge and skills which were linked to nutrition and hygiene, improved household income, animal husbandry, and becoming community leaders.
Okay, welcome back to the show. Sorry, my dog just decided to have a little crazy moment there. Apologies. I hope that you guys had enjoyed the interview with Dan there. I certainly found it riveting to discuss, the future of education, as well as, the prospect that AI, the prospects of AI on our sector. Most certainly, there's a lot for us to kind of chew over, and I hope now within this next segment, I'm going to kind of discuss with you all, what the future of education may look like. Now, obviously, welcome back to the show. Obviously, we're discussing the latest trends in education, innovations, insights, etc. And I want to use this next segment just to kind of introduce the concept of the future school. Now, as educators, we know how education has evolved over the years, from chalkboards to smartboards. But the question still remains, what does the future hold for our sector, especially being, and we've just heard it there from Dan himself, technology is advancing at such a rate that it's going to have rapidly transformative impact on the sector that we know and love so well. Now, the future school is not just a buzzword or a fleeting trend, as we sometimes hear on social media, etc. It's a full-on transformation of education that is already happening in classrooms from around the world. We've just had Dan there speaking about these kind of privately invested schools from across the globe, where these global communities, this global education community is forming to really get the best thinkers and problem solvers together, or at least to kind of educate them together in a single place, online in the digital realms. But also, and I'll be referring to Valerie Hannon, a researcher that worked alongside, in conjunction with UCL, had produced a think piece that provides, a detailed look at what a future school entails. But I think for this part of the show, let's just dive into it and see what it's all about. This concept of a future school. Now, at its core, the future school is an innovative approach to education that's designed to equip students with the skills that they'll need to tackle the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century, the century that we're living in at the moment, the rapidly changing century that seems to throw new tech at us every few years or so. It's a radical departure from the traditional model of education that emphasizes kind of that rote memorization, standardized testing, and a kind of one-size-fits-all approach to teaching and learning. Now, in future schools, students are not just passive learners. They are active participants in their own education. They are encouraged to explore, to experiment, to collaborate, if you will, with their peers and their teachers to develop the critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, and the communication skills that are essential for the success in the modern world. But I'd imagine some of you are sat there thinking, well, that's no different from what we do now. How is it different? What makes the future school so different from the schools that we're teaching in now? Because I certainly are covering lots of those skills there in terms of, the communication, the collaboration, the exploration of subjects, etc. As educators, we take that stuff to heart. It's what we do. It's our job. It's the sea that we swim in. If you don't mind me quoting Yorick Merlinson from Philip Pullman's Northern Lights there. Now, in the future school, though, for starters, it is different. It's characterized by a number of key features that do set them apart from your traditional school models. Now, these features, you could argue, these are the principles that Valerie Hannon kind of refers to. The research, the think piece that she did, actually, she worked in conjunction with some of the, future thinking organizations in the globe. Not future thinking as in like they're predicting the future, but organizations that are readying themselves, preparing themselves for a future yet unseen. Those companies that are sitting on the edge of technology, the ones that are just waiting for it to happen and then spur into the future because they were prepared for it. Now, these future thinking organizations all shared together a set of kind of design principles that kind of glued them together. Now, these principles can be broken down into sets of values, and from that we can then start to look at these different archetypes of these companies and apply them to the education sector. So these archetypes may include the promotion of digital learning and the promotion of technology. You may have a school that champions this, for example. It could be a school that champions like the values-driven approach, the ethical approach to leadership, for example. And by values-driven, we're talking, that concept of character formation, building the human being based on the values that we hold dear, values which we will allude to as we continue on in this program. Also, another archetype, and we've already discussed this, is that concept of global learning. We're no longer going to be sitting in those bricks and mortar schools isolated from the world. If you're not a part of a trust already, if you think becoming a part of a trust is scary, just imagine becoming a part of the global school, if that is the future in 2050. But as practitioners, perhaps we better start thinking and preparing for this future unseen in case it does happen. We want to be malleable, we want to be adaptable so that we can continue on doing what we love most, and that is building the human being after all. Finally, there is the concept of STEAM education. You guys will probably be familiar with the concept of STEM: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. The A in STEAM, represents art. I think quite often art is overlooked as a subject within schools, but personally, I'm an English teacher. I absolutely love English, but I also am a huge fan of the arts and especially art and design. I think if I'd walked a different path in life, perhaps I would be an art teacher today. Now, we will start off discussing digital learning because I've already alluded to this in previous shows with you. I write about it a lot online. And I think we just do a quick whistle-stop tour of this concept before we move on. So digital learning, as we mentioned before, refers to the use of technology and digital tools to enhance the learning experience. It encompasses a wide range of resources and strategies, from online classes and interactive apps to educational games and simulations. By leveraging the power of technology, digital learning aims to create a more engaging, interactive, and personalized learning experience for students. So why is digital learning such an important part of the future school? For one, it reflects the reality of the world that students are growing up in. In today's digital age, technology is ubiquitous and constantly evolving, and students need to be equipped with the skills and knowledge to navigate and thrive in this environment. Digital learning also has the potential to make learning more accessible and inclusive by breaking down geographical and socio-economic barriers and providing students with a more flexible and adaptable learning experience. Strip away the difficulties that we have perhaps in in this current age of ours, in the 20th century. Strip away those biases. Okay, if we can provide a digital experience for all of our students, then we have an equal playing field. Everybody can have access to education regardless of their background, regardless of their needs for example. Now, examples of digital learning, that may include online classes. We've all been there. Some loved it, some didn't. I for one, I relished it. I loved teaching on online, but I wouldn't kind of do it full time. No chance. I like that human connection. Interactive apps, educational games, simulations. But I think digital learning is more than just those interactive games, etc. Digital learning is about setting up an environment online that your students can kind of tune into, plug into, if you will. Like, I'm currently experimenting with the digitalization of my English classrooms. And it's more than just setting up, say, like a Google Classroom. It's more than just setting up like a Teams group and setting homework on. There's a level of interactivity that the students can work on. So if there is a student, for example, that needs a bit of additional support or is afraid to put their hand up and ask you the question in the classroom because of their own anxieties or their own not wanting to be pinpointed out, etc., all they need to do is type a question in the chat box, and it takes away the pressure and the feeling of angst, the feelings that you may sometimes feel. I mean, perhaps I'm speaking to the wrong audience here, but I certainly felt this at school sometimes when picked upon to answer a question. Or I know some of you probably won't believe this, but those of you that know me, but actually, feeling of mortifying. I remember sitting in history classes and being asked questions by my very strict history teacher, Mr. Thomas. Actually, he was my NUT rep when I first started teaching as well. But I remember not being able to answer questions on the agricultural revolution, and his hands would slam down onto the desk beside my head to wake me up, and it was mortifying. To have the option to then perhaps ask him a question by just typing in a message chat box on my phone, just say, "Oh, so what was the weight of that pig again?" Something along those lines. It perhaps may have helped me learn more about the agricultural revolution that he was trying to teach us. So I suppose what I'm trying to get across to you here, in terms of that digital sphere, that digital space to learn, think about the way that you operate your lives on the digital sphere. If you use social media, if you have a digital network at your school, the way that you interact with each other online is the way that students will be interacting with each other online in the future, because they are growing into that world. They are already in that world, but that world is dominated by social media apps that are pulling their attention away from the things that matter, in this case, education. So I think it's our moral responsibility as school leaders to train students, to train this newer generation on how they can utilize the space online to benefit themselves and to benefit others in a collaborative and sufficient way. And it all starts really by having that online presence, that online community. My colleague, actually, Ben Martin, had set up a house competition. It's the Sutton House Cup, actually, that we have at our school, and this huge competition, which has got great enthusiasm from all of the classes. And I just have to put it out there that it is my house that are currently winning. And watching them play football today against Empathy, 4-0. Oh my God, we are totally winning the Sutton House Cup. But the point that I'm making here is Mr. Martin has placed this online, and that is going to galvanise support for the Sutton House Cup. The competitions are posted there. There's input from the students there. There's input from the staff there. Collaboratively, we're working together to build that competitive, that prideful, competitive nature, culture within our schools. And that's the sort of digital experience that we're looking for here. That's engagement on a much more deeper level than just perhaps having a fancy game in your classroom. Now, typically I would give some story time to this part of the show. However, I'm just conscious of our time. The story is very similar to our story from last week, but we can save that for another show, I am sure. Now, it's time to explore another essential aspect of the future school: global learning. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because we heard a lot of this from Dan just before. Now, global learning is about expanding horizons, developing a mindset that values diverse perspectives and cultures and ideas. In a world that's increasingly interconnected, it's essential for students to understand and appreciate different perspectives to succeed in their personal and professional lives. So, what does global learning look like in practice? Here are some examples. We've got the cross-cultural exchange programs. These programs allow students to travel to other countries and experience different cultures firsthand. I remember teaching some German boys that came to the first school that I worked at, and Peter, one of them, was very complimentary over the time and effort I put into developing his English speaking skills. We've got online collaborations with technology. I've just discussed that at length as well. We've got collaboration, with different cultures across the cultural competencies, etc. Teachers could help students develop their cultural competency by incorporating cultural diversity into their curriculums, including the teaching of different cultures, etc., religions, histories, and encouraging respectful dialogue about sensitive topics. We've got global citizenship initiatives as well. Like, it could be that you may run an eco club, for example. If you are a global citizen, then what are you doing in terms of protecting that global environment, perhaps? By incorporating global learning into the curriculum, what I'm suggesting here is that schools can develop a global mindset that prepares them for success in the rapidly changing world that our students live in. It's not just about learning facts and figures. It's about developing those kind of core values like empathy, for example, like cultural awareness, a sense of responsibility for making a positive impact in the world. And, through the words of my esteemed colleague, Dr. Millard, these kids that we're teaching today, this generation, they are the ones that are going to have to be making the big decisions in, when we reach, our retirement. They're the ones that are going to be deciding what to do with the energy crisis. They are the ones that are going to be deciding how to navigate the disruption that technology will cause. And I would like to think that we've skilled those students up enough to make those well-informed decisions. Now, global learning is not just about the curriculum. We said it's also about the school culture. Now, the future school fosters an inclusive and diverse community that values and celebrates the different backgrounds of and cultures and experience. It creates a safe and supportive environment where students can learn and grow without fear of discrimination or prejudice. And I know, again, this sounds very similar to what we aim for inside of schools, but deeply and truly, you want to shatter that presumption, that assumption that it exists. I've worked in schools where the rhetoric is there. Our students are mindful. Our students do not discriminate. Our students do not feel prejudice. But then when you start to scratch beneath the surface, you see, well, actually, there's huge prejudice taking place here. There are segments of students that are segregated from other groups. That's not the future school. The future school truly is a place which is, discrimination free. So global learning then is a critical aspect of the future school, in that it prepares students for success in the rapidly changing world, as we've discussed. By developing that global mindset, students can broaden their horizons, deepen their empathy, and become responsible and engaged citizens of the world, essentially the world that we are going to be living in as they care for us. Now, we have been exploring the future school at length, and I just kind of want to tie that in with the concept of the 4 C's of 21st century education. And these are all words that have been used throughout this show so far. The 4 C's, if you're not familiar with them, are critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. Again, they may sound like buzzwords. They do kind of prop up here and there within social media feeds, etc. But I, for one, firmly believe and am quite passionate about making sure that these 4Cs are central to the curriculum that I've designed and delivering to my students, obviously in line with the national curriculum, but having these 4Cs alongside helps me direct and helps me kind of feel it's my moral responsibility to kind of develop these skills inside of the classroom. Now, we all know that the world is rapidly changing, and so are the skills that are required to succeed in it. And it's these 4 skills that are essential for every student to develop, and they are highly emphasised in modern educational frameworks, as I've alluded to. You know, that whole concept of critical thinking, for example, Dan was alluding to. It's not just the students that need to be able to critically analyse and critically think, but it's also staff, even in this new landscape of educational technology and artificial intelligence and chatbots, etc. Our staff need to be trained up to critically analyse the content that they are viewing. Now, critical thinking, you know, is a skill, and it refers to that ability to analyze information and to evaluate the arguments and draw logical conclusions for ourselves. It's about questioning those assumptions. It's looking at things from a different perspective, the reason why it's such an important skill for the 21st century is because students will be growing up in a world that is saturated with misinformation. It's going to be saturated with fake news. It's going to be saturated even with deep fakes when it gets to it. It won't be before long until, you know, you could superimpose a teacher's face onto any video that's on there on the web. Just think of the safeguarding concerns that are going to hit the education sector when deep fakes eventually arise. And critical thinking is there for us to teach the students to kind of really think twice about what it is that they're viewing. Is this genuine information? Is this authentic? And that's why it's more important than ever before. Moving on, though, we have communication. This skill is about articulating our thoughts and ideas clearly and effectively, both verbally and in writing. And this is a skill that I take to heart very much so, because I want to develop the communication skills of my students in writing, in their understanding of reading, the written word, but also in speaking, the way they articulate themselves, because I believe there's a lot of power to be had in those that are able to use words as a weapon. Just today, actually, I was listening to In Our Time, a show about druids, of all things, and they were talking about how druids would use curses and curse words, and that was actually quite a prevalent and impactful thing that kind of really did harrow and steer off the Romans that were coming in to slaughter them. I just think words have a lot of power, and if we can teach students to be able to talk, they'll be able to kind of face the world head on and not be taken advantage of, perhaps. Obviously, it's a fast-paced world, and communication is going to be key in order to navigate that world. Now, collaboration is the third skill that we will be discussing. It's about working effectively with others towards a common goal, including problem solving, decision making, and conflict resolution. Collaboration, it's not just about working together, but it's about leveraging the diverse strengths of each team member to achieve success. So yes, you can collaborate in a classroom. Yes, you can, work in groups in the classroom, but collaboration is that step further where you are developing the leaders within that class, and you're encompassing everybody to have to contribute in whatever they feel strength into contributing. Now, creativity, the final C in our 4Cs here, is the ability to think outside of the box, to generate new ideas and approach problems in those innovative and creative ways. Breaking free from that traditional thinking. And I think together, those 4 skills form the backbone of 21st century education. They kind of sit as that backbone of the future school, alongside those archetypes that we've discussed prior. I mean, I didn't even touch upon STEAM and the values driven approach, which I suppose I really should do now. In terms of STEAM, obviously the artistic approach is that creative approach, and it's I feel anyway that those STEAM subjects are absolutely crucial for the 21st century. In fact, I believe experts have predicted that 65% of children entering primary school today, as in today will end up working in jobs that don't yet exist. And we've heard that. I'm certain you guys have heard that phrase many times before, but that's a genuine reality. The jobs that our students will be entering and walking into by the time they reach an age to be working and entering their working lives, their professional lives, they're going to be walking into a world that looks very different from the world that we're in now. Fast forward another 10 years, into their future, the world is going to change even more so, even more rapidly. And it might be that these students are going to have to completely reinvent themselves, re-educate themselves to learn a new host of skills for a new host of jobs continually. Gone are the days where you could take my father, for example, get yourself a job, work there day in, day out, for the foreseeable future, for your lifetime. Gone are the days where you will just be working a single job, from the moment you leave school to the moment that you retire. The jobs of the future are going to be varied. They are going to change. They are going to morph into jobs that we don't even know. And I suppose what I'm trying to get at here is that it's important for us to prepare our students by developing those 4 Cs: the critical thinking, the communication, the collaboration, the creativity to think of new novel ways to reinvent themselves, be able to do that. Just think for a second how stressful it is to experience change. Imagine losing your job today because, and this is a worst case scenario, let's say AI does strip away the need for teachers. So schools suddenly okay, the AI clearly can teach better than humans, so we're just going to employ AI now. Now, worst case scenario, let's say that does happen. What happens then to the teachers? Where would you go? What job will you do? Think of the stress that will incite upon you. You are going to have to reinvent yourself as a human being. You're going to have to reinvent yourself, perhaps look for another skill set that you can go out there and apply your skills in this sector or that sector or this sector. You're going to have to reinvent yourself, your identity. Now, thankfully, I don't think that's going to happen to us, but the generations that we're teaching, there is a real possibility that it will happen to them. Every decade, there is going to be, a new set of jobs or older jobs being replaced or being taken away by robots or machine learning or AI, whatever it may be. And we have that moral responsibility to prepare students for that. And that's where the future school comes in, because the future school is an initiative, as I said, that strips away from the old systems that we are working on and preparing students to thrive in the 21st century. Now, we've got 15 minutes of the show left. Before I play the news, because I think we'll end on the news here. I'm sorry, Teacher Talk Radio, I may have overrun ever so slightly here. I do want to play the segment that I know you all love and cherish so much. This is Did You Know? Now, Did You Know is the segment of the show where I will share with you several facts really about the content that we have been exploring, just as a way just to kind of give you some more information. Things that I found quite interesting online that I think would be of some benefit to you, my audience. So let's start. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic forced schools around the world to shift online, leading to a surge in the adoption of digital tools and platforms. By August 2020, more than 1.2 billion students in 186 countries were affected by school closures, making it the largest disruption to education in history. Write that one down. That will be in a pub quiz in 30 years' time. What was the largest disruption in education history? Well, August 2020, COVID-19. Number 2, did you know the term global classroom refers to the idea of using technology to connect students and educators from different parts of the world, allowing them to collaborate and learn from each other? This approach can help promote cultural understanding and prepare students for globalized workforce. Well, I hope you knew that one, because that's one that I had shared with you prior. Number 3, did you know a virtual reality, VR for short, technology is increasingly being used in education to create immersive learning experience. For example, students can use VR to explore historical sites or science labs, providing them with a more engaging and interactive way to learn. That's interesting. It really is. I've seen actually renditions of VR tech where you can go on a virtual tour of the body going inside. Think of the Magic School Bus where it goes through the human body and you can go to different parts of it. Brilliant. And did you know, number 4, that according to a study by the World Economic Forum, by 2025, over half of all current workplace tasks will be performed by machines. 2025. That's a scary figure, isn't it? Compared to just 29% today. This highlights the increasing importance of 21st century skills like critical thinking, communication, and collaboration, and of course creativity in preparing students for the workforce. By 2025, half of all current workplace tasks will be performed by machines. I kid you not. Even McDonald's are investing in AI that will flip hundreds of burgers per hour, more so than the human being can. Number 5, did you know that the demand for workers in STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts and mathematics, fields is projected to continue to grow in the coming years? The Bureau of Labour Statistics estimates that employment in these fields will grow by 8% from 2019 to 2029, adding over 1 million new jobs. And finally, did you know that a values-driven approach to education has been found to foster greater engagement and motivation among students? A study by the University of Bristol found that schools that prioritise values such as respect, discipline, empathy, courage, integrity, gratitude, links to higher levels of student engagement and motivation than schools that do not practice these values. Now, on that note, I'm going to end the show there. I'm going to play for you our news, final piece of news for today. And I will thank you all for listening. It's been a great show. I've really enjoyed myself. I hope you've enjoyed the show too.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The iNews website covers the issue of vaping in schools. Whilst vaping is thought to have helped many adults kick their unhealthy smoking habits, the rise in straight to vaping in young people and children rings alarm bells for many. The report focuses on concerns expressed by teachers about angsty pupils struggling with the wait for their next fix, vapors making school toilets frightening places as they gather in groups, increases in internal truancy, and worries it may lead to pupils experimenting with stronger substances. Some schools have made significant changes to toilets to include sophisticated sensors which set off an alarm when e-cigarettes are used, whilst others have increased numbers of staff on duty in corridors to deter pupils from skipping lessons in order to vape. Many schools have also invited police and health specialists in to talk about vaping in a bid to educate pupils on the dangers. Many schools across the UK now ban vapes, treating them like other banned items such as drugs and knives. This is prompting suspensions and other high-level sanctions in a bid to remove them from schools. England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Sir Chris Whitty, said last week that the number of children vaping was appalling and heavily criticised companies which produce them in flavours such as green gummy bear and watermelon bubblegum. The bright colours, shapes reminiscent of highlighter pens, and the low cost of around £5 making them attractive to youngsters with pocket money to spare, which Whitty described as utterly unacceptable. The proportion of 11 to 17-year-olds who say they have tried vaping rose from 14% to 16% in 2022, according to a YouGov survey, with a percentage of children who regularly vape doubling in the same time period. The article also features references to Teachers Talk Radio's Tom Rogers' tweet asking how much of a problem vaping was for schools, with many replies indicating it is a serious cause for concern. Full details of the article are available online. In related news, many media outlets have been reporting on so-called school protests, which seem to be focused on toilets and the right to use them as a key issue. According to multiple stories, pupils have been encouraged to protest about rules focused on restricting free access to toilets by posts on social media platforms such as TikTok. The majority of the schools affected make it clear that rules around access to toilets are made for safeguarding purposes, designed to protect all pupils and to minimise bullying, vaping and other antisocial behaviours. The Evening Standard reports that a quarter of UK student gamblers may be experiencing harm, whilst half said betting had affected their university experience. The survey of over 2,000 students at UK universities was conducted in December. It found that 71% of the respondents had gambled in the last 12 months, with 24% exhibiting problem gambling behaviour. Of the students who said gambling had had an impact on their experiences at university, 13% said they'd had trouble paying for food, 10% had missed lectures, and 9% struggled to pay bills. A third of student gamblers said they spent between £11 to £20 per week, with 13% admitting to a spend of between £50 and £100 per week. Only 55% of those surveyed were aware that support for them was available through their universities. Full details of the report are due at the end of February. Finally, Aberdeen Live reports on a project led by the University of Aberdeen, which has led to a successful trial of a new approach to teaching which is helping improve adult literacy in Rwanda. The project adapted the existing adult educational curriculum to better develop relevant knowledge and skills which can be applied in students' daily lives. These techniques included role play, group activities, case studies and problem solving. Previously, only 14% of those pursuing an adult learning course felt they had gained the skills they needed, with 66% still unable to read and 76% unable to write by the end of the course. The new method showed improvements in multiple areas, with adults retaining their knowledge and skills, which were linked to nutrition and hygiene, improved household income, animal husbandry, and becoming community leaders. The project was funded by the Scottish Government. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.